The hum of the server room was the only constant in my life. It was a low, monotonous drone that vibrated through the floorboards of my apartment, a constant reminder of the digital world that paid my analog bills. I lived a life of quiet precision, measured in millimeters on architectural drafts, and the exact steep time of my Earl Grey tea. For 3 years, my world had been a carefully constructed grid of routine and observation, and the primary subject of that observation was Alexander Nowak. Alex was our firm's landscape architect, the wild, untamable garden to my rigid, structural steel. He was all broad shoulders and an easy laugh that seemed to echo in the open-plan office long after he'd left a room. He carried the scent of fresh soil and something crisp, like green apples, a stark contrast to the sterile smell of toner and recycled air that clung to the rest of us. He was, by all accounts, effortlessly, blindingly straight. He talked about football on Mondays, dated a string of women whose names I never bothered to learn, and had a way of clapping men on the back that was so deeply platonic it felt like a declaration. And I, Leo Vance, was pathetically, hopelessly in love with him. It wasn't a dramatic, cinematic love. It was a quiet, creeping ache, a background radiation that colored my days. It was in the way I knew he took his coffee, black, 2 sugars, and the way I'd find myself tracing the lines of his profile in the margins of my notebooks during meetings. I watched him from the safe distance of my cubicle, a naturalist observing a magnificent, unaware creature in its natural habitat. I cataloged his micro-expressions, the slight furrow of his brow when he was concentrating on a design, the way the corner of his mouth twitched just before he made a joke, the brief, unguarded stillness on his face when he stared out the window at the city below. My life was a fortress of solitude built to protect a fragile heart. I had friends, of course, but no one I let in completely. My apartment was my sanctuary, a meticulously curated space filled with books on urban planning, minimalist art prints, and a single, thriving fiddle-leaf fig tree I'd named Ferdinand. It was a space for one. There was no room, emotionally or physically, for the kind of chaos Alex represented. My feelings for him were a secret garden of their own, tended to in the quiet hours of the night, a place of beautiful, painful blossoms that could never see the light of day. I was a passive observer of my own life, and that was how I thought it would always be. Then came the Sterling Tower project. It was the kind of monolithic undertaking that made careers or broke them, a behemoth of glass and steel that consumed our firm for months. The final deadline loomed over us like a guillotine, and the last 72 hours were a blur of caffeine, takeout containers, and the frantic clicking of keyboards. Alex and I were thrown together, our departments inextricably linked. His designs for the rooftop gardens and public plazas had to integrate seamlessly with my structural plans. For 2 straight days, we barely slept, sharing a large drafting table littered with blueprints, coffee cups, and the ghosts of our sanity. The usual office chatter fell away, replaced by a focused, functional intimacy. I saw a side of him I'd only glimpsed before. The easy charm was stripped away by exhaustion, revealing a core of intense, quiet determination. He wasn't just the office golden boy, he was brilliant. He saw things in space and flow that I, with my rigid lines and load-bearing columns, had never considered. "What if we shift the entire western promenade 5 degrees?" he murmured late on the final night, his voice a low, gravelly thing, thick with fatigue. He leaned over the plans, his arm brushing against mine. A jolt, sharp and electric, shot through me. I could feel the warmth of his skin through the thin cotton of my shirt. I could smell the faint, clean scent of his soap mixed with the musk of a long day. "The support columns are already set there," I said, my own voice sounding strained and distant to my ears. "I know," he said, not looking up. He grabbed a pencil, his movements sure and swift. "But look, if we do this, we create a natural sight line to the old courthouse. It connects the new with the old. It tells a story," he sketched, and as he did, I saw it. It was a small change, but it was everything. It was poetry. My admiration was a painful, swelling thing in my chest. He was so effortlessly good at what he did, so alive. We worked in silence for another hour, the only sounds the scratching of his pencil and the soft whir of the plotter printing our final revisions. The storm that had been threatening all day finally broke. Rain began to lash against the massive plate glass windows of our 40th floor office, the wind howling a mournful song around the corners of the building. It felt apocalyptic, like the world outside was ending while we were safe in our climate-controlled bubble. At 3:17 a.m., we sent the final files. An anticlimactic click of a mouse, and it was over. We both slumped back in our chairs, the adrenaline that had sustained us draining away in a sudden, debilitating rush. The silence in the cavernous, empty office was immense. "We did it," Alex breathed, running a hand through his already messy dark hair. He looked utterly wrecked. His eyes were bloodshot, a dark stubble shadowed his jaw, and his shirt was rumpled. He had never looked more beautiful. "We did," I agreed, a weak smile touching my lips. We cleaned up our mess in a shared, zombie-like state, throwing away empty cups and stacking stray papers. The energy between us had shifted. The professional focus was gone, leaving something raw and personal in its place. We were just two tired people at the end of a very long night. Alex checked his phone, his face illuminated by the bluish glow. The furrow in his brow returned. "Shit, what's wrong?" I asked, my heart giving a nervous little flutter. "Storms knocked out most of the train lines. The last one on my route left an hour ago. Service is suspended until morning." He stared at the screen, then looked around the empty office as if a solution might be hiding behind a filing cabinet. He lived in a leafy suburb an hour and a half away by train, a world away from my shoebox apartment in the city. My brain went into overdrive. This is it. This is the moment. Offer him your couch. It's the decent thing to do. He's your coworker. It doesn't mean anything. My internal monologue was a frantic, high-speed negotiation between my deeply ingrained politeness and my equally deep-seated fear. What if he said yes? What would I do with Alex Nowak in my carefully ordered sanctuary? The thought of his chaotic energy contained within my quiet walls was both terrifying and exhilarating. He would see my books, my art, the single lonely mug in my dish rack. He would see me. While I was busy having a silent meltdown, Alex sighed and scrubbed a hand over his face. "Well, I'm screwed." He looked at me, a wry, exhausted smile on his face. "Guess I'm sleeping on the floor of my office." No. The word escaped my lips before I could stop it. It sounded too loud in the quiet room. He raised an eyebrow, his gaze curious. I cleared my throat, my pulse thrumming in my ears. "Don't be ridiculous. My place is only a few blocks from here. You can take the couch." The words felt foreign, like I was speaking a language I'd only just learned. He was quiet for a long moment, just looking at me. His gaze was steady, unreadable. I felt pinned by it, like a butterfly in a display case. I could feel a blush creeping up my neck. I was sure he could see the frantic hope and terror warring in my eyes. I was sure he would make some excuse, laugh it off, and I could retreat back into my safe, predictable shell. Then, he clapped a hand on my shoulder. His hand was large and warm, and the weight of it was a solid, grounding presence. The simple, friendly gesture sent another tremor through my system. It felt anything but casual. It felt like an anchor. "Leo," he said, his voice soft. "You're a lifesaver. You sure you don't mind?" I shook my head, unable to form words. I just nodded. A dumb, jerky nod. "Okay," he said, the wry smile returning, but this time it seemed to hold a genuine warmth. "Lead the way." The walk to my apartment was a surreal journey through a deserted, rain-slicked city. The wind whipped around us, tugging at the cheap umbrella I'd managed to find in the office closet. It was too small for both of us, and we were forced to walk huddled together, our shoulders and hips bumping with every step. I was acutely aware of every point of contact, of the heat radiating from his body in the cool, damp air. The scent of rain on asphalt mixed with his own personal scent, creating something intoxicating that filled my senses. We didn't speak. The howl of the wind and the percussive drumming of the rain filled the silence. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence, though. It was a shared cocoon, a temporary bubble against the storm. In the reflection of a darkened storefront window, I caught a glimpse of us. Two figures, close together under a single umbrella, looking for all the world like a couple heading home after a late night. The thought sent a fresh wave of heat through me, a dangerous, foolish hope. My building was a pre-war walk-up, clean but unremarkable. The lobby smelled faintly of lemon polish and old paper. As I fumbled with my keys, my hands slick with rain, I was suddenly, intensely self-conscious. This was it. I was bringing him into my world, my meticulously constructed, fiercely private world. He was about to cross a threshold no one from my work life ever had. The lock finally clicked open, and I pushed the door inward, stepping aside to let him pass. "It's not much," I mumbled, an apology already on my lips. He stepped inside, bringing the storm with him. Droplets of water clung to his hair and the shoulders of his jacket. He stood in the small entryway, his presence seeming to fill the entire apartment, shrinking my carefully arranged space into something impossibly small and intimate. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked. My apartment was essentially one large room, with a small galley kitchen sectioned off by a counter and a door leading to the bathroom and a tiny bedroom. It was a testament to my personality, neat, ordered, and quiet. Books were stacked in precise piles. A single throw blanket was folded neatly over the arm of the gray sofa, and the art on the walls consisted of black and white architectural photographs. It was a space designed for calm, for solitude. Alex slowly turned, his gaze taking in every detail. I held my breath, waiting for a joke about the obsessive neatness, or a polite but hollow compliment. Instead, his expression was thoughtful, almost soft. He looked from a framed print of the Salk Institute to the stack of novels on my coffee table, to Ferdinand, my fiddle-leaf fig, standing proudly in the corner. "This is nice," he said, his voice low. He met my eyes, and there was a genuine curiosity there, a flicker of something I couldn't name. "It's you." That simple observation hit me harder than any compliment could have. He saw it. He saw the connection between the space and the person who inhabited it. He saw me. A part of me, anyway. "Thanks," I managed, shrugging out of my wet jacket. Let me get you a towel. And some dry clothes, if you want. We're about the same size, I think." "That would be great," he said, his smile reaching his tired eyes. I retreated into the bedroom, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. My hands were shaking as I pulled a clean towel from the linen closet and rummaged through my dresser for a t-shirt and a pair of sweatpants. They were old and soft from 1,000 washes, my go-to comfort clothes. The thought of Alex wearing them, of his body being enveloped in fabric that had so often enveloped mine, was dizzyingly intimate. When I returned, he had taken off his wet jacket and was standing by my bookshelf, running a finger along the spines of my books. He turned as I entered, and for a moment, we just stood there, the towel and clothes a bridge between us. "Bathroom's just through there," I said, gesturing with my head. I'll make some tea." It was my default action when faced with social anxiety. When in doubt, boil water. He took the offering from my hands, his fingers brushing against mine. The contact was brief, fleeting, but it lingered like a brand. "Thanks, Leo." As the sound of the shower started, I leaned against the kitchen counter, my legs feeling weak. The sound of another person showering in my apartment was deeply unfamiliar. It was an act of domesticity I had never shared with anyone. The space was no longer just mine. It was ours for tonight. I filled the kettle, my movements automatic, my mind a chaotic whirl. What was I doing? What was he thinking? Was this just a matter of convenience for him? A simple act of collegial kindness on my part? Or was this something else? He emerged from the bathroom a few minutes later, scrubbed clean, and wrapped in my gray t-shirt and sweatpants. The sight of him stopped my breath. The clothes, which were comfortably loose on me, clung to his broader frame. The soft cotton of the shirt stretched across his chest and shoulders, and the sweatpants hung low on his hips. His hair was damp and tousled, and without the sharp lines of his work clothes, he looked younger, softer, more approachable. He looked at home. "A perfect fit," he said, a small, self-conscious smile playing on his lips as he tugged at the hem of the shirt. He smelled of my soap, a clean, sandalwood scent that I had only ever associated with my own skin. Now it was his scent, too. The thought was disorienting. I handed him a mug of tea, our fingers brushing again. This time, I didn't pull away so quickly. "Chamomile," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "It's supposed to help you sleep." "I think I could sleep for a week," he laughed, taking a sip. "Thank you for this. Seriously, you saved me." "It's nothing," I said, turning away to busy myself with my own mug. The couch isn't the most comfortable thing in the world, but it's better than the office floor. He didn't reply immediately. I could feel his eyes on me as I stared intently into my tea, as if it held the secrets of the universe. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken things. The only sounds were the hum of the fridge and the distant, muted sound of rain against the window. Then came the moment that changed everything. I finally risked a glance at him. He was standing near the sofa, his travel bag still slung over one shoulder. He wasn't looking at the couch. He was looking at me. His expression was serious, his gaze intense. Then, he let the bag slide from his shoulder. It landed on the hardwood floor with a soft, definitive thud. He looked from my face to the closed bedroom door and then back to me. His jaw was set. "Make room," he said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a demand. It was a statement. A quiet, world-altering declaration that hung in the air between us, heavy and fragile all at once. My meticulously ordered world tilted on its axis. The careful grid I had constructed shattered into a million pieces. Make room. My brain struggled to process the two simple words. They echoed in the sudden, ringing silence of the apartment. Make room on the couch? No, he wasn't looking at the couch. He was looking at the bedroom. My bedroom. My bed. The single bed that had held only me for years. A cold wave of panic washed over me, immediately followed by a tidal wave of scorching, terrifying hope. I am dreaming. This is a sleep-deprived hallucination. He doesn't mean what I think he means. He can't. He's Alex. He's straight. He's just tired and doesn't want to be polite about the lumpy couch. My mind raced, supplying a dozen logical, plausible explanations, each one more flimsy than the last. But the way he was looking at me, it dismantled every rational thought. His gaze was direct, unwavering, and it held a question that had nothing to do with sleeping arrangements and everything to do with the charged space between us. My mouth was dry. I swallowed, the sound unnaturally loud. "What?" I whispered, the word feeling inadequate and foolish. He took a step closer. The room suddenly felt 10 times smaller. "The couch looks like a medieval torture device, Leo. And we're both exhausted. It's a big enough bed." His voice was low and steady, a calm island in my sea of panic. But his reasoning felt like a carefully constructed facade, a plausible excuse for something much deeper. I couldn't look away from his eyes. They were a deep, warm brown, and in the soft light of my apartment, they seemed to hold a universe of things I had never allowed myself to imagine. I saw fatigue, yes, but I also saw something else. A flicker of vulnerability, a hint of a question, the same question that was screaming in my own head. "What is this?" I only have one bed," I stammered, stating the obvious, my brain clinging to facts like a drowning man to a piece of driftwood. "I know," he said softly. He took another step. He was so close now I could feel the warmth from his body, see the tiny droplets of water still clinging to his eyelashes. "I'm a quiet sleeper. I don't snore." Much, a ghost of his usual charming smile appeared, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. His eyes were still serious, still searching mine for an answer. This is the moment. The precipice. I can say no. I can point to the couch and insist, and this will all recede back into the realm of the unspoken. We'll wake up in the morning, pretend this conversation never happened, and go back to being coworkers. I can retreat to the safety of my fortress. The thought was a cold comfort. Safe, yes, but also empty. So incredibly empty. Or I can say yes. I can open the door just a crack and let the chaos in. I can risk everything, my carefully guarded heart, my professional life, my sanity, on the unspoken promise in his eyes. I thought of all the years I had spent watching him from afar, all the quiet moments of yearning, all the daydreams I had ruthlessly suppressed. I thought of the feeling of his arm against mine at the drafting table, the sound of his laugh echoing in the hallway, the scent of him now filling my small apartment. My whole life, I had been building walls. And now, here was someone, the someone, standing at the gate, not trying to break it down, but simply waiting to be let in. My gaze dropped from his eyes to his mouth. Just for a second. It was a subconscious, magnetic pull. When my eyes returned to his, I saw a subtle shift in his expression. A flare of heat. He had seen it. He knew. Maybe he had known all along. I took a slow, shaky breath. The air felt thick, heavy with electricity. I gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was all the answer he needed. The tension in his shoulders seemed to release, and he let out a breath he seemed to have been holding. A real, genuine smile finally touched his lips, transforming his face. Okay, he said, the single word a soft agreement, a pact. The next few minutes passed in a strange, dreamlike haze. We moved around each other in the small space, a silent, awkward ballet of two people navigating a brand new, terrifying territory. I went into the bathroom to brush my teeth, my reflection in the mirror a stranger with wide, panicked eyes. Is this really happening? I splashed cold water on my face, the shock of it doing little to clear my head. When I came out, he was standing by the bed, having pulled back the simple gray duvet. He looked uncertain for the first time all night, as if he was second-guessing his own boldness. The confidence he usually wore like a second skin was gone, leaving him looking exposed and vulnerable in my borrowed clothes. The sight was profoundly endearing. "Which side do you want?" he asked, his voice quiet. "Doesn't matter," I said, my voice equally hushed. I walked to the side of the bed nearest the wall, the side that had always been mine. It felt safer, somehow, more protected. I slipped under the covers, my body rigid with tension. The sheets were cool against my skin. I lay on my back, staring up at the ceiling, every nerve ending in my body screamingly aware of him as he moved to the other side and got in. The mattress dipped with his weight. He was there, in my bed. He lay on his back, too, a careful foot of space between us. But in the small confines of my double bed, it felt like no space at all. I could feel the heat of him. I could hear the soft sound of his breathing. The air was charged, humming with everything that had been left unsaid, not just tonight, but for the last 3 years. Silence. A minute stretched into 5. The only sounds were the rain, now a gentle patter against the glass, and the frantic beating of my own heart. I was so tense my muscles ached. I kept my eyes fixed on the ceiling, tracing the faint cracks in the plaster, as if they were the most fascinating things in the world. Just lie still. Go to sleep. In the morning, this will all be a weird dream. But I couldn't sleep. My body was a live wire. My mind was a symphony of what-ifs. Every tiny shift of his weight on the mattress, every soft exhale, was magnified 1,000 times in the darkness. The scent of him, of my soap on his skin, was all around me, a dizzying, intimate perfume. I am lying in bed next to Alex Nowak. The thought repeated itself over and over, a mantra of disbelief. Then he moved. He turned onto his side, facing me. I didn't dare turn to look, but I could feel his gaze on my profile. The intensity of it was a physical touch, a warmth that spread across my cheek and down my neck. "Leo," he said, his voice a low murmur, barely disturbing the quiet of the room. I turn now. My body moves of its own accord, a slow, deliberate rotation until I am facing him. My heart is a frantic bird beating against the cage of my ribs. In the faint gray light filtering in from the street lamp outside, I can see his face. His expression is open, serious. The playful mask is gone completely. This is the real Alex, the one I saw hunched over the blueprints, the one I saw in the tired lines around his eyes. "You know I'm not thinking about the Sterling Tower project right now, right?" he says, his voice a soft rumble that vibrates through the mattress, through me. I shake my head, a tiny, jerky movement. "No," I whisper. My throat is tight. "Me neither." He holds my gaze. His eyes are so dark in the dim light, they seem to pull me in. "I've seen the way you look at me." The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. It's not an accusation. It's a simple statement of fact. A fact I had thought was my most closely guarded secret. All this time, my careful observation had not been a one-way street. He had been observing me, too. The realization is both terrifying and exhilarating. I have been seen. I can't speak. I can only look at him, my heart in my throat, my entire life's yearning laid bare in the space of a single breath. I'm not good at this," he says, and the admission of uncertainty from someone as confident as Alex is staggering. The talking part. "Me neither," I manage to choke out. A small, sad smile touches his lips. I know he hesitates for a fraction of a second, then slowly, tentatively, he reaches out. His hand closes over mine on top of the duvet. His fingers are long and warm, his palms slightly calloused. He doesn't just take my hand. He laces his fingers through mine. The fit is perfect. It feels like coming home to a place I've never been before. This is real. This is happening. The thought cuts through the fog of my disbelief with a brilliant, terrifying clarity. He moves a little closer, the space between us shrinking until I can feel the warmth of his breath on my face. It smells of chamomile and something uniquely his. "Is this okay?" he whispers, his thumb stroking the back of my hand. "Is this okay?" The question is so gentle, so considerate, it undoes me. All the fear, all the anxiety, all the years of pent-up longing, they all melt away, replaced by a profound, bone-deep sense of rightness. I don't answer with words. I squeeze his hand. That's all it takes. He closes the last remaining distance between us. His other hand comes up to cup my jaw, his thumb stroking my cheek. His touch is impossibly gentle. He searches my eyes one last time, a final, silent question. And then he kisses me. It's not a kiss of frantic passion or desperate need. It's slow. It's tentative. It's a question and an answer all at once. His lips are soft, warm, and they taste faintly of tea. It's a kiss of discovery, of exploration. It's a quiet conversation in a language I never knew I spoke. My own hand comes up to rest on his shoulder, feeling the solid muscle beneath the thin cotton of my t-shirt. I feel a tremor run through him, or maybe it's me. I can't tell where he ends and I begin. When he finally pulls back, it's only an inch. Our foreheads rest against each other. Our fingers are still tightly laced together between us. I keep my eyes closed, trying to memorize the feeling of this moment. The warmth of his skin, the solid presence of his body next to mine, the soft, even sound of his breathing mingling with my own. "Leo," he breathes my name, and it sounds like a prayer. I open my eyes. He's looking at me with an expression of such raw, open vulnerability that it makes my heart ache. The confident, charming Alex from the office is gone. The brilliant, focused architect is gone. In his place is just a man, here in the dark with me, looking just as scared and hopeful as I feel. "I'm not straight," he says, the words a quiet confession in the dark. I've never. I didn't know how, and in that moment, I understood. It wasn't about labels or categories. It was about connection. It was about seeing someone and being seen in return. All the walls I had so carefully built around my heart didn't just crumble. They evaporated, as if they had never been there at all. "It's okay," I whispered, and I realized with a startling clarity that it was. "Me neither." He smiled, a true, radiant smile that lit up the dim room. And then he kissed me again. This time, there was no hesitation. It was a kiss of acceptance, of relief. It was the beginning of everything. I woke to the pale, gray light of dawn filtering through my window. For a moment, I was disoriented, my mind still thick with sleep. Then, it all came rushing back. The storm, the missed train, the conversation in the dark, the kiss. "Alex." I turned my head slowly. He was still there, asleep on his side, facing me. His arm was thrown over my waist, his hand resting loosely on my hip. His breathing was deep and even. In the soft morning light, his face was relaxed, the lines of exhaustion from the night before smoothed away. He looked peaceful. He looked young. A dark lock of hair had fallen across his forehead, and I had to fight the overwhelming urge to reach out and brush it back. A wave of panic, cold and sharp, washed over me. What have I done? The intimacy of the scene was staggering. Waking up with his arm around me, his body a warm, solid presence in my bed. It was something straight out of the daydreams I had so fiercely repressed. But now it was real, and the reality of it was terrifying. Last night had been a bubble, a strange, magical pocket of time created by exhaustion, stress, and a thunderstorm. But the sun was rising. The storm was over. The bubble was about to burst. What happens now? Was this a one-time thing? An anomaly? A moment of curiosity for him, born of convenience and proximity? The thought was a shard of ice in my chest. He would wake up, realize what he'd done, and the awkwardness would be unbearable. He'd retreat behind his easy smile, and I'd be left with the ghost of his warmth in my bed and a heart that was even more broken than before. Carefully, slowly, I slid out from under his arm, my movements as stealthy as a thief's. He stirred, murmuring something in his sleep, but didn't wake. I held my breath until his breathing evened out again. I tiptoed out of the bedroom, closing the door behind me with a soft click. In the living room, the evidence of last night was everywhere. His bag on the floor, his damp clothes slung over a chair to dry. Two mugs, one with a dreg of tea still in the bottom, on the coffee table. My apartment, my sanctuary of solitude, was now a shared space, filled with the undeniable presence of another person. It felt different, invaded, but not in a bad way. Occupied, lived in. I went into the kitchen and started the coffee maker, the familiar ritual, a small comfort in the sea of my anxiety. The smell of brewing coffee filled the small apartment. I leaned against the counter, wrapping my arms around myself, and stared out the window at the rain-washed city coming to life. The sky was a clean, pale blue. The storm had passed. My mind was a battlefield. One part of me wanted to cherish every second of what had happened, to replay the feel of his lips, the warmth of his hand in mine. Another, more dominant part, was already bracing for the impact of rejection, building the walls back up, brick by painful brick. It was a mistake. He was just tired. He'll be embarrassed. He'll pretend it never happened. The bedroom door opened. I froze, my back to him, my knuckles white as I gripped the edge of the counter. I couldn't turn around. I heard his soft footsteps on the hardwood floor, then a pause. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. I could feel his gaze on my back. Say something. Say anything. Apologize. Laugh it off. Just break this unbearable tension. He didn't say anything. Instead, I heard the soft scrape of a chair being pulled out from my small kitchen table. Then, the sound of him sitting down. I finally forced myself to turn. He was sitting at the table, wearing my clothes, his hair a mess from sleep. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring down at his hands, which were resting on the table. He looked uncertain as I felt. The sight of his vulnerability chipped away at my carefully reconstructed armor. I poured 2 mugs of coffee, my hands shaking slightly. I placed one on the table in front of him without a word. He looked up, and our eyes met for the first time that morning. His were clear, but guarded. The openness from last night was gone, replaced by a cautious hesitation. "Morning," he said, his voice husky with sleep. "Morning," I replied, my own voice tight. I sat down opposite him, wrapping my hands around the warmth of my mug. We sat in silence for a long moment, the only sound the faint hiss of the radiator. The air between us was a chasm of unspoken fears. This is it, I thought. The awkward retreat, the polite thank you, and the hasty exit. Then, he did something that surprised me. He reached across the table. He didn't say anything. He just laid his hand, palm up, on the worn wood between our mugs. It was an invitation. A question. I stared at his hand. It was a strong hand, capable. The hand of a man who worked with the earth, who shaped landscapes. It was the same hand that had held mine in the dark, that had cupped my face so gently. My fear was a cold, heavy weight in my stomach. But the memory of the night before, the feeling of rightness, of connection, was a small, stubborn flame. I had a choice. I could leave his hand there, untouched. I could let this moment pass and retreat back into my safe, lonely world. Or I could take a risk. I could meet him halfway. Slowly, as if moving through water, I lifted my hand and placed it in his. His fingers closed around mine instantly, his grip firm and warm. A wave of relief so profound it almost made me dizzy washed over me. He met my eyes, and the guard was gone. The caution was gone. In its place was the same raw, open vulnerability I had seen last night. "Last night," he said, his voice low and serious. "It wasn't because of the train, Leo." My breath hitched. "It wasn't." He shook his head, his thumb stroking the back of my hand. The simple, repetitive motion was incredibly soothing. "I've wanted to for a long time. I just didn't know how. I thought you hated me." Of all the things I had expected him to say, that was the last. "Hated you? Why would I hate you?" A wry, self-deprecating smile touched his lips. "I don't know. You're always so quiet. So focused. You barely ever looked at me. And when you did," he trailed off, looking down at our joined hands. "When you did, you always looked away so fast. I figured I annoyed you. The loud, dumb jock in the office." I was floored. All this time, I had thought I was invisible to him. All my careful efforts to hide my feelings, to maintain a safe distance, he had interpreted as dislike. The irony was so thick, it was almost laughable. "I don't hate you, Alex," I said, my voice thick with emotion. It was the opposite. He looked up, and the relief in his eyes was palpable. It mirrored my own. We had been two people living in the same space, speaking two different languages, completely misinterpreting every signal. Until now. The opposite, he repeated softly, a real smile spreading across his face. Good. That's really good to know. We finished our coffee in a comfortable silence, our hands still linked on the table. The awkwardness had evaporated, replaced by a quiet, fragile sense of hope. When it was time for him to leave, to go home and change before we both had to head back into the office, the goodbye at the door felt charged. So, he said, standing in the entryway in his own, now dry clothes. He looked like the Alex from work again, but something was different. The way he looked at me was different. I'll see you at the office. Yeah, I said, my stomach twisting with a new kind of anxiety. The office. The question hung unspoken between us. What are we now? What happens when we're back under the fluorescent lights, surrounded by our colleagues? He seemed to read my mind. He stepped closer, placing a hand on the doorframe next to my head, boxing me in. Hey, he said, his voice low and for my ears only. It doesn't just disappear, okay? We'll figure it out. He leaned in and gave me a quick, soft kiss. It was chaste, nothing like the night before, but it was a promise. Then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him, leaving me alone in my apartment, my fingers pressed to my lips. The day at work was one of the longest of my life. Walking into the office felt like stepping onto a stage. Every glance from a coworker felt like a knowing stare. Every whispered conversation seemed to be about me. I was paranoid, hyper-aware of everything and everyone. When Alex arrived, he gave me a brief, friendly nod, just as he always did. Morning, Leo, to anyone watching, it was completely normal. But I saw the way his eyes lingered on me for a fraction of a second longer than usual. I saw the tiny, almost imperceptible smile at the corner of his mouth. It was a secret, a silent communication just for me. We spent the day orbiting each other, caught in a strange gravitational pull. We had a brief meeting about the next phase of the Sterling project, and sitting across the table from him was torture. I was so aware of him, of the way he tapped his pen against his notebook, the sound of his voice as he discussed drainage systems. It was mundane, professional, yet everything felt charged with the memory of the night before. I felt like I was going to combust. The test came at lunchtime. A group of our co-workers was heading out, and Sarah from marketing called out to him. Alex, you coming? He was standing near my desk, ostensibly looking at a blueprint. He glanced at the group, then his eyes flickered to me. It was a moment of decision. The easy, normal thing to do would be to go with them, to slide back into his comfortable role as the office socialite. He shook his head. Nah, I've got to finish this up, he said, tapping the blueprint. You guys go ahead. They left, and the office was suddenly quieter. He waited a beat, then walked over to my desk, leaning against it casually. You eaten yet? He asked, his voice low. No, I said, my heart starting to race. Good, he said. I was thinking we could order in. My treat. To thank you for, saving me from the floor. His eyes twinkled. He was teasing me, but the underlying message was clear. He was choosing to stay here, with me. We ate sandwiches at my desk, talking about everything and nothing. Work, movies, the ridiculousness of our boss. It was easy. It was comfortable. It was the kind of normal, everyday interaction I had only ever dreamed of having with him. And underneath it all, the secret hummed between us, a shared current of electricity. For the next few days, we lived in this strange, exhilarating duality. At work, we were colleagues, our interactions subtle, a stolen glance here, a brief touch of hands when passing a file there. But we texted constantly, a running conversation that spanned from late at night to early in the morning. We learned about each other's histories, our families, our fears, our dreams. I learned he wasn't a jock at all. He read classic literature and volunteered at an animal shelter on weekends. He learned that my quietness wasn't aloofness, but a shield. The fear and anxiety hadn't disappeared entirely, but they were slowly being replaced by a growing sense of wonder. I felt like I was seeing the world in color for the first time. Every day was filled with a low-level thrum of anticipation, of waiting for the next text, the next secret smile across the office. But it couldn't stay like this forever. We were in a holding pattern, orbiting a future that was still undefined. The question of what happens next grew louder with each passing day. On Friday, As we were packing up to leave, he walked over to my desk. Most everyone else had already left for the weekend. The office was quiet, bathed in the warm, golden light of the setting sun. "Got plans this weekend?" he asked, his tone casual, but his eyes were intense. "No," I said, my pulse quickening. "Just reading. Watering Ferdinand." He smiled, a soft, genuine smile. "Good." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "I want to do that again." "Do what again?" I asked, though I knew exactly what he meant. "The staying over part," he said, his gaze unwavering. "But not the missing the train part. And not the sleeping in our clothes part." The implication was clear, bold, and terrifyingly wonderful. He wasn't talking about crashing on my couch, or even sharing my bed out of necessity. He was asking for a repeat of the intimacy, a conscious, deliberate choice to be together. He was asking for a date, a real one. All the air left my lungs. This was it, the conscious choice, the step out of the gray area and into something real. "Okay," I breathed, the word full of all the hope and fear I felt. "Okay," he confirmed, his smile widening. "My place this time. I'll cook." The weekend felt a lifetime away. When Saturday finally arrived, I was a nervous wreck. I changed my outfit 3 times before settling on a simple pair of dark jeans and a soft cashmere sweater. Driving to his suburban house felt like a journey to another planet. This was his world, his territory. His house was a charming little bungalow, surrounded by a riot of a garden that was probably breathtaking in the spring. Even in the late autumn, it had a wild, beautiful order to it. It was him. He opened the door before I even knocked, a wide, happy smile on his face. He was wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans, and he looked so relaxed, so at home. "Hey," he said, his voice warm with welcome. "You made it." He ushered me inside. His home was nothing like my apartment. It was warm, a little messy, and filled with personality. There were photos on the mantelpiece, a well-worn guitar leaning in a corner, and a big, goofy-looking golden retriever who came trotting over to sniff me enthusiastically. "That's Buster," Alex said, laughing as he scratched the dog's ears. "He approves." The evening was perfect. It was simple. He cooked pasta, and we drank red wine, sitting at his rustic wooden kitchen table. We talked for hours. There were no pretenses, no walls. He told me about his last serious relationship with a woman in college, and how it had never felt quite right, how he had always felt like he was playing a part. I told him about my own loneliness, about the fortress I had built around myself. It was a night of confessions, of vulnerabilities shared and accepted. Later, we sat on his comfortable, oversized sofa, Buster snoring at our feet. The wine had made me warm and relaxed. He put on some music, a quiet, instrumental track, and the atmosphere was soft and intimate. He turned to me, his expression serious. "I'm really glad you didn't hate me, Leo." I smiled. "I'm really glad you missed your train, Alex." He closed the small space between us and kissed me. And this time, there was no hesitation, no uncertainty. It was a kiss of deep, soulful connection, of 2 people who had finally found their way to each other. It was a kiss that held the promise of 1,000 more to come. We ended up in his bedroom, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. It was an unfolding, a slow, gentle discovery of each other that was more emotional than physical. It was the feeling of his skin against mine, the whisper of my name against his lips, the simple, profound act of being truly seen by another person. It wasn't about sex, it was about intimacy. It was about closing the final distance between us. The next morning, I woke up wrapped in his arms, the sun streaming through the window. There was no panic this time. There was no fear. There was only a quiet, profound sense of peace. I lay there for a long time, just listening to him breathe, memorizing the weight of his arm over me, the scent of his skin. I watched him sleep, this man who had, in the span of a week, completely dismantled my world and rebuilt it into something brighter, bigger, and infinitely more beautiful. I thought about the man I was just a short time ago, the quiet observer in his lonely fortress. It felt like a lifetime ago. I was no longer watching from the sidelines. I was here, in the heart of it all. He stirred, his eyes fluttering open. He looked at me, a slow, sleepy smile spreading across his face. "Morning," he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. "Morning," I whispered back, my heart so full I thought it might burst. He tightened his arm around me, pulling me closer until our foreheads were touching. "So," he said, his voice a low, happy rumble. "About next weekend." I laughed, a real, uninhibited sound. It was the sound of a man who was no longer afraid. It was the sound of a man who had found his way home.